Hello. Doesn't it seem to you as if the number of wars has been increasing in recent years? We seem to hear you say yes. In our opinion, unfortunately, this is the case. Today we will tell you about an interesting detail about the Ukraine-Russia war, which has been in our lives for almost more than 2 years. Can you stand up to one of the world's greatest military powers when you have extremely limited opportunities at your disposal? For example, how long can you resist a country with 4,200 fighter jets while the number of fighter jets you have is 300? Or can you stop the force? The number of tanks is 6 times larger than you, and the Navy is 16 times larger. Can we say that there is a country that deconstructs this almost impossible seeming painting using drones whose value ranges from $100 to $5,000? You understand that we are talking about Ukraine, right? How did it really happen that drones landing from the dusty shelves of technology markets were able to push Russia, one of the world's largest military powers, so hard? Let's take a look at the Ukrainian field through the eyes of a drone this time, and trace the game-changing role of unmanned aerial vehicles on the battlefield. Rather than when Russia's attack on Ukraine will start, how many hours will it end? Do you remember the days when he entered the prediction race? Those who say Ukraine cannot hold out for 72 hours have been waiting for the end of the war for 2 years. Isn't it so painful? For months, a war has been going on right next to us that has never ended, and it is unknown when it will end. And what is happening again to children, women, and the innocent. Now let's rewind the calendar a little and take you to the beginning of the war. Perhaps you rightly don't remember those days in detail, but we are sure that the person we are going to talk about now definitely stays in the corner of your mind. In the early days of the war, we were all laughing at the posts of a Turkish Twitter user. This account tagging the Ukrainian embassy. How can I contact you? I have strategies that I can't write openly that can change the course of this war, he was saying. Do you remember? At that time, everyone made fun of this exchange, but at the end of the day, this proposal became one of the most decisive elements of the Russia-Ukraine war. Basically, the idea was as follows. There are tens of thousands of semi-professional unmanned aerial vehicles of relatively small size waiting to be sold to citizens in grocery stores. By putting hand grenades and Molotov cocktails on them, a kamikaze drone attack on Russian armored troops can be organized. If we remember correctly, it was the middle of 2022. Ukrainian drones suddenly began to have more and more say in the course of the war. Here is a Ukrainian commander who gave an interview at that time. There are 2 big wars between Russia and DEC. One is an artillery war, and the other is a technology war, he said. Yes, perhaps too many subheadings were getting into the technology war part, but when you read the rest of the interview, it became clear that the issue he was actually talking about was the unmanned aerial vehicles owned by Ukraine, especially drones. The average price of the drones they had was $2,000, while the value of the Russian targets they hit corresponded to millions of dollars. This was indeed one of the most unstable or, if we use the term correctly, asymmetrically interesting wars the world has ever witnessed. When the calendars showed February 24th, 2022, Putin's signature had almost created a bombshell effect. The Russian troops had been ordered to advance into the interior of Ukraine, and soon the bomb effect was replaced by real bombs and missiles fired one after the other. In fact, Russia did not progress very badly in the first moments, but after the first 24 hours, it seemed like something wasn't going right. Do you remember the Russian armored vehicles that were left unprotected in the middle of the road, right? Because the logistical planning was incomplete or done incorrectly. Hundreds, thousands of Russian soldiers stood helplessly before they could reach their targets. The state of Russian soldiers entering grocery stores and trying to find food, trying their luck at gas stations, not knowing what to do, seemed strange to the world. However, Ukraine was at such a point in the early part of the war that it could hardly make a single move against the convoys standing unprotected in the middle of the road and the surrounding soldiers. After that, things gradually changed. Let's face it, the biggest transformation happened when the support that Western countries provided to Ukraine, just in order to harm Russia, suddenly grew, and especially the United States stepped in. Perhaps the biggest breaking point for Ukraine here was that it could quickly adapt the opportunities it had to today. If they had waited for the Western allies to provide planes, it might have been too late. It's not just airplanes either. As a result, dozens of Russian tanks were roaming all over the country, and it was necessary for them to produce a remedy for this. It was at this point that the Sea Hus came into play first. In the first place, It was very successful in repelling Russian elements and some strategic attacks. However, these platforms were both large, relatively slow, and unprotected. In addition, it was also unlikely to replace a new one immediately when they were dropped. You haven't forgotten the Turkish Twitter user we told you about above, have you? What did he say? With hundreds, thousands of drones standing on the shelves, Russian troops can be harmed. Yes, Ukraine has done just that, but he did it in such a way that he ensured that drones, which have somehow existed in wars so far, have become the new golden boy of the battlefield. He first placed simple and then relatively more advanced explosives on several $1,000 drones. In fact, the method they followed was simple. After all, a Chinese drone manufacturer was already almost in a monopoly situation in many parts of the world. Ukraine started from those in its own country first. Special units have been created for drones. Then, all the procedures that were implemented before the war regarding the import of drones into the country were abolished. The country suddenly began to host thousands, hundreds of thousands of drones. Now, let's get to the question on everyone's mind immediately. Is it really that easy to turn a simple drone into such a dangerous fighter? We answer without thinking, yes. In fact, the Ukrainian soldiers are not hiding the prescription. In order to tell their problems, they explain how they do it in the Western media, where they often appear for a period in a way that everyone understands. They are taking a drone out of its box with an average value of $2,000 and within reach of everyone. These are capable of carrying between 200 and 500 grams of explosives. Daisy, let's add this. There are also slightly larger models of the same brand. They also carry about 800 grams of explosives. Making the bombs is the job of soldiers or civilians working in the background. It is useful to keep in mind that informal military training has been provided to the civilian population since 2014 in order to do these things in Ukraine. Now let's come to the conclusion. Let's look at our basic outputs first. First of all, no matter what, drones now have meanings much beyond small, cute gadgets that shoot video from the air. Secondly, they are still very cheap. Considering the tanks, ships, armored units, and other elements against them, their costs are low and their effects are high. This reality is the most important sign that we will see them on the battlefield for a long time to come. It is possible to buy 55,000 medium-level drones for the money of an F-35. Thirdly, they are able to terrorize very large masses. In a simpler way, drones flying in the sky can give thousands of people the fear that they may fall on us at any moment. In addition, using drones against civilian elements is much simpler compared to other military equipment. Fourth, it is very easy to access this kind of vehicle. That's it for today. See you in another video. Goodbye.